Welcome to Hope Talks. I'm Dr. Charles Montorio-Archer, President and CEO at One Hope United. Hope Talks is a conversation around protecting children, stabilizing families, and sustaining communities. Our guest today is John W. Rogers, founder and chairman at Ariel Investments. Welcome, John.
It's great to be here.
Thank you. I'm very glad that you're here. So let's get right into it. It's just a very quick conversation about how we think about the world and how we participate therein. So you are such a generous philanthropist. What motivates you to be civically and philanthropically engaged?
I think a couple of things. I have to say, growing up here in Chicago and establishing my business career in Chicago, Chicago has a long history of business leaders getting involved civically. You know, our commercial club and our civic committee, there's a whole generation of leaders, the Andy McKennas, the Lester Crowns, the Pat Ryans, the Jim O'Connors, the Ned Janatas. They just set a stage that if you're going to be involved in business here, you have to be involved in helping the local community thrive and be successful. So I think that was something that was just made sense to me. And it actually fit with the way that I was trained playing basketball at Princeton. My coach, Pete Carrill, always taught you that you got ahead if you thought about your teammates first. And if you found a way to help your teammates, the team would win and you'd win in the long run. So when I got home, I felt I was a part of the Chicago team. And I wanted to be able to be a helpful teammate. And that fit in naturally with this sort of culture that had been created here in this city.
I think it's really important because Chicago is built on community and is built on leaders deciding to be civically involved. So thank you for all the work that you have been doing. There are so many ways to be involved in one's community. How do you determine how best to leverage your involvement and your impact?
Well, we've tried to leverage it in a couple of ways. You know, I grew up in a family that was very involved with the civil rights movement. They had overcome a lot of obstacles. You know, my dad was a Tuskegee Airman, an original Tuskegee Airman. He flew over 100 missions in World War II, and he used to talk about the fact that he was overseas fighting for rights that he couldn't enjoy here in the United States. My mom was the first African-American woman who graduated from the University of Chicago Law School in 1946, and she talked about they didn't want her there. They tried to talk her out, say you should be a paralegal and not a lawyer. And her grandfather had the Stratford Hotel in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that got burned down during the race riots, the race massacre. So I came up with these parents who were just so engaged and involved in helping me to understand the unfairness of our society. You know, the ramifications of Jim Crow and slavery and all the ways that women and people of color, in particular African Americans, were not being treated fairly. So that helped get me motivated and engaged to sort of say I wanted to focus on race and try to create equal economic opportunity for our community. And I think it was because of the way that I grew up with the parents that I had. I have to also say, you know, my mom early on was very close to Reverend Jackson, and I can still remember as a little kid, you know, sort of sneaking downstairs and listening to him hold court in the living room, you know, and so being engaged and involved with the Rainbow Push from the beginning is, you know, Reverend Jackson has been an inspiration for me personally and has made a real difference in my life. And then when I was 24, Jim Compton, who ran the Chicago Urban League, got me involved in the Urban League. And it gave me a chance to see the challenges that the Urban League was confronting and working toward, and that helped motivate me to get more engaged and involved. And so this issues around equal economic opportunity is something that I can't overstate how important it is. And again, as an African-American entrepreneur and coming from parents who tried to build their own practices of law, to see those challenges that they face, all these things help motivate me to say this is an area of focus.
It's really interesting that, you know, and what you said about the generational opportunity you had to see your parents do it. How important do you think this will be as we think about the next generation of civic and philanthropic leaders? I've had the opportunity to meet some of your interns, and you're obviously investing in the future business leaders, but how important is it to ensure that the next generation is also thinking about community?
Well, I think it's critically important, and everywhere I go, and I think sometimes young people get tired of hearing me preach to them and push them and challenge them to say, you know, it's up to them. You know, the next generation of business leaders have to be willing to sit in leadership roles in corporate America or in the nonprofit world and fight for economic justice and fight for social justice. Not be silent, not just make everybody comfortable and be afraid to go out there and push and fight in the spirit of the late Congressman John Lewis, make good trouble. If the next generation doesn't speak up the way the prior generation did. Here in Chicago, we were blessed to have these iconic black leaders that made such a difference. John Johnson, Ebony and Jet, George Johnson with Afro Sheen and Ultra Sheen, Ed Gardner with Soft Sheen Products. These folks were fighting for economic justice, fighting for fairness, getting engaged, involved with the civil rights movement and progressive political leaders. So we've got to remind next generation that they have that same responsibility, because the challenges today are different, but they're extremely troubling today. The one data point that I always use is that the dean of Yale's Business School always reminds us that today, when it comes to wealth, African Americans are worse off relative to white Americans than our grandparents were. And if you think about that, that we think because of the civil rights movement we moved ahead. When it comes to wealth, we're actually further behind 40 years ago. So to your point, there's just such a responsibility for the next generation to fight hard for fairness.
When I think about it personally, I think about this idea that every generation should be able to say, this is what I've done, this is what we've contributed to ensure that the next generation could be better. And I think what you're talking about is this idea that there is a responsibility to ensure that those who come after us, those in our family and those not in our family, to be able to contribute. So,
to add to that, I'll just say one of the things that Ariel, we try not to, as a friend of mine, John McCarr, always says, just not admire the problem, come up with solutions. So a little over 20 years ago, we created a conference for African Americans that are on corporate boards. And Charles Tribbett from Russell Reynolds has been our partner from the beginning. Deloitte's our partner now. And Melody Hobson's done a great job of leading this effort. But the idea of our conference every year is to bring together African Americans and now Hispanic board members who are on the biggest companies in the world and remind them that they have a responsibility to speak up and fight for fairness in the boardroom. And the way that we do that is every year we have what we call the conscience of the conference. And it has been the late Congressman John Lewis. We've had Reverend Jackson, we've had Reverend Sharpton, we've had Harry Belafonte. We've had Ambassador Andy Young. People are actually marching with Dr. King out there fighting for this to remind the next generation of leaders that they have this responsibility. And I just can't overemphasize how important it is that, because these older leaders, they get older, unfortunately they pass on, and if we don't connect this generation to the prior generation, we'll continue to falter.
Just with that conference, what has been the trajectory of attendees? I'm sure it's been going on for some time, and hopefully you've been seeing an increase. What has that been like inside the conference, and the energy about the organizers?
Well, it's been really energizing and exciting to see the progress. We started here in Chicago with maybe 30 directors, and now typically we have 200 directors. We sell out the hotel that we have in Laguna Beach, Montage, pretty much every year. And people look forward to it, and people coming from the biggest companies in the world, from JP Morgan Chase board to the Apple board to the McDonald's board to what have you. And we get great speakers, diverse speakers. We've had white CEOs from Elon Musk to Jamie Dimon to David Rubenstein. There's black CEOs of Don Thompson, Ursula Burns, Ken Chenault. Just been blessed to these iconic leaders, the Vernon Jordans of the past, who've come to speak with us. We had President Obama has come and spoken. So the energy is fantastic. We try to make it fun for everyone. So every Saturday night we have a surprise entertainment.
Okay.
and over the years it's been everyone from Gladys Knight to Diana Ross to surprise people. And then last year, informally, the conscience of the conference last year was Wynton Marsalis. He spoke on Friday night about what he'd gone through in his life and his family. But then we're all having drinks at the hotel bar afterwards, and it's getting late. The piano player leaves. Next thing you know, Wynton is at the piano.
Of course.
Playing songs for a small group of us who were the late night. So talking about the energy around this conference, we hopefully are transforming our leadership in a way by reminding them that they should keep track of how money is being spent. keep track of philanthropy on the corporate boards. Are they going to black institutions? Keep track of the executive suites. We call it the 3 Ps: people, philanthropy, and purchasing. Making sure that we're keeping track of those things. And if you think about it, those of us that are fortunate to be in the corporate boardrooms are often on the board of the local hospital, university, museum, nonprofit, and we're hoping that they can bring these values to every leadership role. And of course, the corporations where they often work. So we have this dream that the conference can really make a difference.
It's good to always hear that we're not all business, because it's really easy for us to be business all the time, and that you created a space also for people to have some fun.
Yeah.
So that's been great. You have so many talented members of the Ariel Investment team. How do you grow and mentor them to be active in the community, not just from a professional perspective, but the civic perspective as well?
I think we try to be role models of the benefits of being engaged and involved in the community. Melody Hobson got it from the beginning, and she's joined various boards. As you know, now she's the chairman of Starbucks.
Yep.
Used to be the chairman of DreamWorks Animation. She's the chairman of After School Matters, and just many different roles. And so hopefully next generation of leaders at Ariel see that for myself and for Melody and some of the old timers, how beneficial it's been. I think on the one hand, of course, you hope you're making a contribution to the organizations that you're serving on, whether it's a nonprofit board or a corporate board. They're equally very important that you're making a difference there and bringing your skills and talents to make those organizations stronger. But I think also our teammates see that you benefit too. You build a broader network when you're in the boardroom with other leaders. You also gain confidence because you're often having to make presentations. You often have to chair a committee. You're making and all of a sudden you see yourself as a peer of the other board members. So I think these are great development tools for next generation of leaders when they get to serve on a board. And we're excited. With some of our teammates just recently have joined boards from Shedd Aquarium to Paul University.
Nice. To
go along with some of the other things that we think are so important here. And I just can't overemphasize that, giving back ultimately ends up, at least for me, it energizes me. I'm excited when I, am involved and engaged in an organization that I care about and where you can make a difference. And so we try to encourage that and make time for all of our teammates to be able to serve. And also, if they're on a nonprofit board, for all of us at Ariel and Melody and I as leaders to support philanthropy from a philanthropic standpoint, their work, so that people know that Ariel's going to support the teammates that are willing to serve.
Yeah, I think it's really important. We kind of think about it, from our board perspective, is we want your committee, community, contribution, and connection. Kind of that's the involvement that we do expect when you're on the nonprofit board, but it's really good to know that those leaders in your space can add value in our space. So thank you for making sure that happens on an ongoing basis.
And I'm going to add one other thing. We also encourage our next generation to get involved politically. Growing up the way that I did, we were taught that being engaged in our democracy is important. And we've seen what's happened with our Supreme Court, and we've seen that, that elections matter. And so we really think that some of the most transformative times in my life are around helping Carol Moseley Braun be the first black woman senator, as her finance chairman, to being Illinois finance chairman for Barack Obama. We want all of our teammates to be able to get engaged and involved in the campaigns they care about and the political leaders that they believe in.
So I mean, since you went there, let's go there. Yeah. What do you think it's going to take to move some of that energy forward? Because we can talk about the intentions, which I think our intentions are pure, but we also see the other side of the intentions, which could be challenges. What are some of the things you think we can do, especially from a people space, to bring them to the other side?
Well, it's especially challenging today, as we know. It's such a heartbreaking time, and the people making up things. Facts are not facts any longer. Truth is not the truth any longer. The dishonesty that's out there is just so extremely troubling. My father wouldn't be able to understand this, where he thought the most important thing in life was to tell the truth. And the fact that people are not telling the truth is so troubling. But I have to say, I think we just it's hard. Because I think so many times now, so many corporations have all these rules against being involved in partisan elections. And there are regulatory rules because people are, afraid of business being involved in politics. But take it to its logical conclusion, if people can't participate in democracy fully, well, then this kind of tragedy I think that we've had in this country recently that's part of the result. Because, the wealthiest of the wealthiest can participate and be engaged because they run the companies, or they're retired, or they've got multi-generational wealth, or what have you. And so they can be dominant. And then the average citizen is being told by their corporate HR departments, well, you got to be careful here, or there's some regulation about being engaged and involved politically. Well, then you can have the kind of disappointing results that we've had in this country.
And continue to have in this country. So this is my last question. Definitely thank you for your time. So it's kind of the opposite, the duality of the challenges of society. But what excites you? What gives you hope? Because in order to do the things you do, there has to be the other side of the acknowledgement of the challenge.
Exciting things. I mean, there are leaders who are doing extraordinary work, everywhere you look. We have great teammates at Ariel that I've touched on today who are making a difference. My best friend is Arnie Duncan, former Secretary of Education, and who leaves the cabinet, and now he spends his full-time life running CRED to try to stop the gun violence in our community. And he's actually, he's out in the community working with the young men and women to, help show them a way without guns in their lives, and to be out negotiating with leaders throughout the city to make the city safer. So those kind of leaders need to be celebrated. People don't know the kind of risk that he's taking on behalf of all of us. And then they have to support those political leaders who are willing, the Baracks of the world that could have been a partner at a big law firm, CEO at a big company. He and Michelle to give their lives to helping make our country stronger. We have to celebrate that kind of leadership and not attack them so often. And you look at Robin Kelly here in Illinois, is just doing fantastic work. She's this extraordinary congresswoman. Fighting against gun violence, fighting for equal economic opportunity. And there are others around the country, Joyce Beatty in Columbus, Ohio, of course Maxine Waters, these dynamic black women who've become empowered. And of course our vice president, who's a pioneer and something. So these newer leaders, often again, women of color taking on these leadership roles, gives me hope that we'll get things back on track going forward. And then finally, post George Floyd, after his extraordinary, heartbreaking murder, I think there is energy that's being sustained around creating a more fair and equitable society.
I have to agree. And just by the fact that you're here with me talking about Hope Talks says that we are really thinking about what the future could be. So I thank you, John, for being here.
This is wonderful.
Very much so. Thank you for joining me for this edition or this episode of Hope Talks. Please follow us on all social media outlets at One Hope United. Until next time, thank you.